In a small, sleepy town, the air is thick with a feeling of impending change. The mayor of the town, John Hargrave, a man in his mid-50s with a stern but approachable demeanor, sits in his study, reviewing documents for the upcoming town meeting. His office, adorned with various awards and family photos, reflects the weight of his long tenure. But tonight, something feels different. His daughter Lena, a beautiful young woman in her late teens, had come home earlier than usual. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she entered. John looks up from his papers, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Lena, what's going on?" Lena hesitates, unable to meet her father's gaze. After a long pause, she speaks, her voice shaky. "Dad, I need to tell you something." The room feels colder as John sets the papers down. "What is it?" She takes a deep breath, then lets the words fall out in a rush. "I'm pregnant." John freezes, his mind racing. He'd always thought Lena was too smart to make such a mistake. She had plans for college, for her future. This wasn't supposed to happen, not like this. "Who is the father?" he asks, his voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of disbelief. Lena's gaze drops to the floor. "His name is Matt Donovan. He's a firefighter." John's expression hardens. He knows Matt. The young firefighter had always been respectful, but John never expected him to be involved with his daughter in this way. The thought stirs something deep within him, a mixture of anger, disappointment, and fear for Lena's future. The next day, John confronts Matt. They meet at the local cafe, a small, cozy place where the town's regulars gather. Matt is sitting at a corner table nursing a cup of coffee, looking out the window. When John enters, Matt stands, his expression tense. "Mayor Hargrave," he says, offering a stiff handshake. "Sit down, Matt," John orders, taking a seat across from him. Matt obeys, his hands trembling slightly, betraying his calm facade. "I know what happened," John begins, his voice low and controlled. "You got my daughter pregnant." Matt looks down at his coffee, his mind scrambling for the right words. "Sir, it wasn't planned. Lena, she's important to me." John's eyes narrow. "You better make sure you're ready for what comes next. I won't let this ruin her life." The tension between them is palpable. Matt knows that, as mayor, John holds a great deal of power. His daughter is his world, and John will stop at nothing to protect her. As the days go by, the situation worsens. Lena becomes more withdrawn, avoiding her father's questions and Matt's attempts to speak with her. The town buzzes with rumors, and the gossip spreads like wildfire. The once respected Donovan family begins to feel the heat of public opinion. Matt's colleagues at the fire station begin to question his judgment, and even his own family starts to distance themselves from him. John's mind is consumed with thoughts of protecting his daughter and securing her future. He begins to see Matt not as a young man who made a mistake, but as a threat. As the mayor, he has the means to control the situation, to eliminate the problem once and for all. John begins to gather information on Matt's past, digging into his history with Lena. What he uncovers shakes him to his core. He discovers that Matt has a criminal past, one he had successfully hidden from the public. The pieces start to fall into place, and John begins to formulate a plan. The night arrives. John meets with an old acquaintance from his political past, Mark Lawson, a man known for his connections to the criminal underworld. John's plan is simple: take care of Matt and make sure he's out of the picture for good. Mark, always willing to do a favor for someone in power, agrees. As Matt leaves the firehouse late one evening, unaware of the danger that awaits him, John watches from his car, the weight of his decision heavy on his chest. He had once believed that the end justified the means, but now, as he looks at the silhouette of Matt walking down the street, he wonders if he's gone too far. A figure emerges from the shadows, a knife glinting in the streetlight. The figure approaches Matt, who turns just as the blade plunges into his chest. The streets are silent, the only sound the soft echo of Matt's body hitting the pavement. The news spreads quickly. Matt Donovan, the young firefighter, is found dead on the side of the road, a victim of an apparent mugging gone wrong. The police investigation leads nowhere. No witnesses, no clues. Just an unsolved murder. But John knows the truth. He knows that his own actions led to Matt's death, and now he must live with the consequences. Lena, devastated by the loss of Matt, begins to unravel. The weight of the secret becomes too much to bear. She confronts her father, demanding to know the truth about what happened to Matt. John, caught between his love for his daughter and the guilt of his actions, struggles to maintain his composure. The tension in their relationship reaches its breaking point, and in a moment of raw emotion, Lena threatens to expose everything: the affair, the murder, and the dark secrets that John has buried for so long. Lena had been avoiding her father for days. Every time John tried to talk to her, she would retreat to her room or take long walks around the town, as if the world had become too heavy for her to bear. But tonight, she couldn't hide from the truth any longer. The guilt, the shame, the anger, it all built up inside her until she could no longer keep quiet. John sat in his study, his mind racing through the events of the past week. The murder of Matt Donovan weighed heavily on him. He had tried to convince himself it was necessary. He had done what was best for his daughter, for her future. But there was no escaping the nagging feeling of doubt. He had crossed a line, and now he was paying the price. The door creaked open, and Lena stepped into the room. She didn't look like the girl he had known. There was a coldness in her eyes, a hardness he had never seen before. Her once gentle demeanor had been replaced by something darker, something more determined. "Dad," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I know what you did." John's heart skipped a beat. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "Lena, I don't know what you're talking about." She took a step forward, her gaze piercing through him. "Don't lie to me, Dad. I know everything. You had Matt killed, didn't you? You couldn't let him ruin your perfect little world, could you? So you took matters into your own hands." John froze. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Lena, you're upset. You don't know what you're saying." But Lena was no longer the girl he had raised. She was a woman now, a woman who had seen the ugliness of the world and understood it in ways he couldn't have imagined. "I know, Dad. I've known for days. I've seen the way you've been acting, the way you've been avoiding me. I know you've been hiding something, and now I know what it is." The room was suffocating, the silence between them deafening. John tried to maintain his composure, but the weight of his actions threatened to crush him. He had done it for her future. But now, all he saw was the broken girl standing before him, the daughter he had tried to protect. The daughter he had ruined. "Lena, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I did it because I love you. I couldn't let him destroy your life. You were everything to me. I would do anything to keep you safe." But Lena wasn't listening anymore. Her anger had overtaken her grief, and her heart, once filled with love for her father, had turned cold. "You destroyed my life the moment you decided to take someone else's life. You didn't think about me. You didn't think about anyone but yourself." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she stepped back, her voice steady but filled with venom. "You may have saved me from the consequences of a mistake, but you've condemned both of us. You've ruined everything. And for what? To protect a lie? To protect your reputation? What kind of father does that?" John's chest tightened as he watched his daughter's resolve harden. This wasn't the Lena he had raised. This wasn't the girl who had always been so eager to please, so trusting of him. In that moment, he realized that the price of his actions was more than just a ruined life for Matt. It was the loss of his daughter's trust, the destruction of their "Lena, please," he pleaded, his voice softer now. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." But Lena shook her head, a bitter smile on her lips. "It doesn't matter what you wanted, Dad. It's too late now. You've crossed a line, and there's no going back." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving John standing there, alone in the dark. the weight of his choices crushing him. The town was in a frenzy. The news of Matt's death had spread like wildfire, and everyone had their own theories about what had happened. Some believed it was a random act of violence, a senseless murder carried out by an unknown assailant. Others suspected foul play, but no one could ever have imagined the truth. The police investigation was stalled from the beginning. There were no witnesses, no clues, no leads. The case seemed destined to remain unsolved, and the town slowly moved on, its residents finding solace in the assumption that justice would never be served. But for John, there was no moving on. Every night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, consumed by guilt and fear. He had made a choice that had cost Matt Donovan his life, and it had cost him his daughter's love. What was the point of it all? Lena had gone quiet after their confrontation. She no longer spoke to him, no longer came home at night, and when she did, she locked herself away in her room. John tried reaching out to her, but she would push him away, her words sharp and filled with bitterness. She had become a shadow of the girl she once was. Broken, withdrawn, and filled with rage, every time he looked at her, John was reminded of the life he had destroyed, the future he had stolen from both of them. Days turned into weeks, and the pain of what had happened festered inside John. He couldn't escape it, and then, one day, something happened that changed everything. Lena came to him again. This time she wasn't angry. She wasn't shouting or accusing him. She was calm, eerily so, and John knew something was different. "Dad," she said, her voice low, "I'm not going to let this go. You may think you've won, but you haven't. I've been talking to people, I've been asking questions, and I'm going to find the truth, the real truth. And when I do, I won't stop until everyone knows what you did." John felt a chill run down his spine. He knew Lena well enough to recognize the determination in her eyes. She had been quiet for too long, but now it seemed she was ready to confront him head on. And this time, he couldn't hide from the truth. "I'm sorry, Lena," he whispered. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." But Lena's gaze was cold. "You can't undo what's been done, Dad. The truth is out there, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." The web of lies and deceit begins to unravel. As Lena digs deeper into the truth behind Matt's death, the consequences of John's actions spiral out of control. Tensions rise, secrets are exposed, and the once perfect life John had built begins to crumble. The battle for redemption has only just begun. Lena's words lingered in the air like an unspoken threat, hanging over John like a dark cloud. He watched her leave the room, her determined footsteps echoing in his mind. For the first time in weeks, he felt truly alone. There was no escape from the storm she was about to unleash, and he knew that when the truth came to light, it wouldn't just destroy him, it would destroy everything he had worked for, everything he had tried to protect. The following days were filled with a sense of dread. Lena's absence from the house was becoming a routine. She didn't return his calls, didn't respond to his texts. It was as if she had completely severed the connection between them. And with each passing day, John felt himself sinking deeper into a pit of regret. He had thought that he could control the situation. He had believed that by eliminating Matt, he could secure his daughter's future, protect her from the scandal, and keep his family intact. But now, he saw that he had made a grave mistake. Lena wasn't the naive little girl he could mold into whatever he wanted her to be. She was her own person, someone with a will of her own, and that will was leading her down a path that John couldn't follow. Late one night, as he sat in his study, staring blankly at the wall, his phone rang. It was an unknown number, and for a moment, John hesitated before answering. "Hello?" he said, his voice shaky. The voice on the other end was cold and unfamiliar. "Mr. Miller, we need to talk." John's heart skipped a beat. "Who is this?" "You don't know me, but I know you, and I know what you've done. I also know what your daughter is doing. She's getting close, Mr. Miller, very close. If you don't stop her, it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out." John's blood ran cold. His mind raced, trying to process the words. "What do you want?" The voice was calm, almost mocking. "I'm not here to make demands, Mr. Miller. I'm here to offer you a choice. You can try to protect your daughter, try to stop her from digging any deeper, or you can let her continue down this path. But if she does, well, let's just say there will be consequences." The line went dead before John could respond. His hands trembled as he put the phone down, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. It wasn't just Lena he had to worry about anymore. There were others involved, people who knew what he had done, people who were willing to use his own daughter against him. For the first time since Matt's death, John felt a sense of panic. He had to act fast. He had to stop Lena before she uncovered the full extent of his involvement. But how? What could he do to protect her from the storm that was about to hit? The next day, John went to the police station. He needed information, needed to know if there was any way he could stall Lena's investigation without raising suspicion. He walked through the sterile, cold halls of the building, his mind swirling with 1,000 thoughts. When he entered the chief's office, he found a man sitting behind a large desk, looking over some files. The chief looked up when John entered, and a flicker of recognition passed across his face. "John," the chief said, standing up and extending his hand, "what brings you here today?" John shook the chief's hand, trying to steady his nerves. "I need your help. My daughter, Lena, she's been asking questions about Matt Donovan's death. She's determined to find out the truth, and I don't know what to do." The chief raised an eyebrow. "You're worried she'll find something? You know she's not going to stop until she does, right?" John nodded grimly. "I know. I just need to make sure she doesn't go too far. She's a good kid, but she doesn't understand what's at stake. If she finds out the truth, it's going to destroy everything." The chief leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "I can't stop her from asking questions, John, but I can make sure she doesn't find the answers she's looking for. You know, the case is still open, right? It's technically an unsolved homicide." John felt a flicker of hope. "You mean you can keep her from finding anything?" The chief gave him a knowing smile. "I didn't say that, but I can make sure she doesn't dig up anything too damaging. If she gets too close, I'll be able to steer her in another direction, but you're going to have to be careful. If she suspects anything, she'll dig even harder. You have to control the narrative, John. Keep her distracted. Keep her focused on something else." John nodded, his mind racing. He knew this wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best he could get. He would have to play along with the police, give them the information they needed while also keeping Lena in the dark. But as he left the station, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was running out of time. Lena was getting closer, and every moment he spent trying to cover his tracks only brought him closer to the inevitable truth. Meanwhile, Lena had her own plans. She had been spending days talking to people who had known Matt, piecing together fragments of information. It was clear that Matt hadn't been the perfect person everyone had made him out to be. He had secrets, just like everyone else, and Lena was determined to find out what they were. She spent hours combing through his personal belongings, searching for anything that might lead her to the truth. She had already uncovered that Matt had been involved with some shady characters, people who were not so easily intimidated. If she was going to find out what had really happened to him, she was going to have to dig deeper than she ever thought possible. But Lena was no fool. She knew that someone was trying to stop her. The strange phone calls, the anonymous messages, the warnings from people she barely knew, it was all adding up. Someone wanted to keep her quiet, and whoever they weren't going to stop until she gave up. But Lena wasn't ready to back down. She had made a promise to herself that she would get to the bottom of this, no matter the cost. If it meant exposing the darkest secrets of her family, so be it. The truth had to come out. As Lena's investigation grew more intense, John's desperation reached a breaking point. He couldn't control everything forever. Sooner or later, the lies would catch up to him, and when they did, there would be no one left to protect him from the fallout. The battle between father and daughter was far from over. The truth was waiting to be uncovered, and no one, not even John, could stop it. The clock was ticking, and the consequences of their actions were about to explode. As the days passed, the tension between John and Lena grew unbearable. They had both crossed a point of no return, and neither one of them knew how this story would end. The weight of their actions hung heavy not just between them, but over the entire town. Everyone had their suspicions, and no one was safe from the inevitable unraveling of. Lena continued her search, relentlessly pursuing any lead that would take her closer to understanding Matt's death. Her investigation led her to deeper layers of deceit and corruption, revealing secrets about her father and others that had been buried for far too long. The closer she got, the more dangerous things became. John, on the other hand, felt the walls closing in around him. His connections were all he had left to keep Lena at bay. He tried everything to divert her, to mislead her, but with each passing day, it became more apparent that she wasn't backing down. She wasn't the scared little girl he used to know. She had become a force of her own, determined to expose the truth no matter the cost. The town had its suspicions, but no one had enough concrete evidence to bring the truth to light. The police were stuck in a web of silence, and despite John's efforts, the case of Matt Donovan's death remained open, with no solid leads. People talked, but no one dared to confront the power that loomed over them all. The power of a man who had been both a protector and a predator. Lena had begun to piece it all together. Late one evening, after weeks of careful investigation, she found something that would change everything. A single document, hidden in plain sight, told the story of the cover-up. It was enough to unravel the entire narrative and expose her father's hand in Matt's murder. She stared at the paper, her heart racing, her mind spinning. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was the key to everything. She now had the evidence she needed, and in that moment Lena made a decision that would define her future. She would not be silenced. She would confront her father, and the truth would come out. John had always prided himself on controlling every situation, on being the one who called the shots. But as Lena stood in front of him with the evidence in hand, he realized how little control he had left. She wasn't just his daughter anymore. She was his reckoning. The confrontation was inevitable. It was brutal, filled with anger and sorrow. Lena told her father everything she had uncovered. She didn't shout or accuse. She simply laid out the facts, one by one, in a cold, calm voice. John's world shattered as he listened, knowing there was no way to hide from the truth anymore. In that moment, Lena realized something. She had always loved her father, but the man standing before her was not the man she had once admired. The man who had once protected her, who had once been her hero, was now nothing more than a broken figure. She had finally come to understand the price of his actions, not just to Matt, but to her and to everyone around them. John, broken and defeated, couldn't look her in the eye. He had made the ultimate sacrifice, but now all he had left was guilt. Lena's words echoed in his mind. "You destroyed my life, and now I will destroy yours." The truth could no longer be hidden. Lena took the evidence and walked away, determined to make sure the world knew what had happened, to make sure her father faced the consequences of his actions. She couldn't undo what had been done, but she could make sure justice was served. In the end, John lost everything. The town turned its back on him. The life he had built, his career, his reputation, his family, was gone. He had played a dangerous game, and in the end it had cost him everything. The murder of Matt Donovan, the lies, the manipulation, everything came crashing down. Lena moved forward, leaving behind the remnants of her broken family. The weight of the truth was heavy, but it was something she had to carry. In the aftermath, she found herself standing on the edge of something new. She had lost a father, but she had found herself in the process. The story had come full circle, but for both Lena and John there was no going back. The damage was done, and the consequences would last a lifetime. The final chapter was written, and all that remained was the wreckage left behind by the choices they had made. The truth had set them free, but it had also destroyed everything they had once known.